Yes, that is when we were schooled in Alaska. Joining me right now to react is Ohio Congressman Mike Turner. He sits on the House Intel and Armed Services Committees. Good to see you, Congressman. Thanks very much for joining us. This is what our State Department is working on right now. Your reaction?
Now, this is of grave concern. In that same meeting in Alaska, top Chinese diplomats also said to Secretary of State Blinken that they wanted America to stop promoting democracy around the world. Obviously, they see democracy as a threat to the Chinese Communist Party. And so any criticism that they can place upon America and our efforts to promote democracy, they see as advancing their goals. Secretary of State Blinken should be very concerned about Chinese criticism of democracy, because anytime we play into their narrative, we weaken America and we strengthen them.
I totally agree. But, Congressman, let's face it, while the Democrats and Joe Biden are race baiting, our enemies and adversaries are ramping up. This week, Putin has amassed 100,000 troops on Ukraine's borders, threatened that anybody who crosses Moscow's red line on territorial or other issues will regret their deeds. What's going on with Russia right now?
You know, this is of grave concern. We had top generals and admirals on Capitol Hill last week sounding the alarm of both what China and Russia are doing. They're modernizing their militaries, modernizing their nuclear weapons. And they were on Capitol Hill sounding the alarm, not just because they're concerned of what our adversaries are doing, that over the next 5 years they could have capabilities that exceed those of the United States, but because they see growing opposition among the Democrats and among the Biden administration for funding the military and for funding the modernization that will keep us safe and our allies safe.
So everybody's ramping up nuclear capabilities, and what are we doing? We're cutting defense spending. Congressman, let's take a short break. We've got to get into that. I want to ask you about also the opportunity Biden has created for terrorists at our southern border. That's next. Stay with us.
I cannot deter with the leftovers of the Cold War forever into the future. That is a 70 eras weapon system that I'm going to have to employ against 2030 level threats.
That was Admiral Richard. We are back with Ohio Congressman Mike Turner, who sits on the House Intel and Armed Services Committees. And Congressman, the Admiral testified in front of your committee. He is the head of the U.S. nuclear arsenal, warning you that for the first time in history, the U.S. is facing two nuclear powers, and we're not ready.
Correct. So, Maria, China is doubling their nuclear weapons. Russia has modernized its nuclear weapons and is fielding new capabilities. And Admiral Richard is looking at an aging stockpile and a Congress that may be unwilling to fund what needs to be done. He's sounding the alarm so that as we go forward in this budget process, with Biden having asked for zero increase in defense, that we fight for nuclear modernization to make certain that we can deter our adversaries.
Well, that's true, but if you're not increasing defense spending, when you consider inflation, you're actually cutting it. And that's what the Wall Street Journal reported this past week. So in terms of readiness, you know, Jack Keane has been on this program, says we're outgunned when it comes to China. And then you've got Democrats led by Elizabeth Warren reintroducing a bill to block the U.S. from using nuclear weapons first. What's the logic?
You know, there really isn't any that's for our security. You know, the Biden administration is proposing 16% increases everywhere else but in defense. Elizabeth Warren obviously wants to, you know, tie the hands of our generals so that they cannot defend against our adversaries. We need to make certain that America stays strong, that we build a strong military, that we rise to the occasion against the modernization of China and Russia. And with that, we'll be able to keep our allies in the United States safe.
Congressman, we're also pulling out of Afghanistan by September.
Right. And this is certainly, you know, a tragedy. I was talking to General Petraeus, and he was saying, you know, part of the concern we have is the ability to be able to continue our terrorism, counterterrorism efforts there.
Congressman, thank you so much for joining me this morning. Mike Turner, that'll do it for us. Have a great Sunday.